Let's start, Jamila.
Okay, thank you, Usha. Good evening, everyone. Warm greeting to all the AIWC members who have joined us on this platform, and also our friends and well-wishers from all over Kerala and India. Um, a special greeting to Mrs. Indira Ramakrishna Pillai, who has joined us, and who is the president of the Trivandrum branch. Greetings to Usha Nair, the zonal officer, my friends who have joined here, and a warm welcome to Deepthi. Deepthi is one of the youngest members to be giving a webinar talk here. And I must say that when I was looking at Deepthi's CV, one of the things that struck me was that here is a young generation who has chosen a profession that not everyone chooses. It is not a common profession. She is an art historian. She is a curator. She has studied history in Delhi and then went on to study in the National Museum Institute, the history of art. So a very different person from the usual run of youngsters that we see around us. In an interview, I saw that Deepthi said that she grew a love for history and for museology because she traveled all over the country with her army officer father, Mr. Sasidharan. So in a way, I think she has to be thankful to her father for exposing her at that young age to the different parts of India, the cultures of different parts of India. And I'm sure that must have instilled in her an inborn love for history and culture. Her mother is a postgraduate in literature. And I think from there, Jayashree, comes her love for beautiful things. And paintings are a beauty. So are also objects of museum. I'm sure Deepthi doesn't see them as objects. She must be seeing them as living entities, because an artifact for a curator is always something that is alive, because it has a long history. It has a story to tell. And it is a visual representation of that long story. And every time I'm sure she meets or comes to handle such artifacts, the innate instinct of the lover of beauty is born in her. And fortunately, I was able to see one or two of her presentations. And I must say, she captures the very essence of beauty in her visual representations of what she has seen as an artifact. And that is one of the ways in which she can take us also on a journey of beauty and of love for that beauty. And I must thank Deepthi for actually giving us that opportunity to love the aesthetics of objects that she has found around her. Deepthi is not only a lover of artifacts and museology, she is also a lover of photography. She has co-authored 2 books. One of the books that she has authored is Indira Gandhi, A Life of Courage. And the other one that she has co-authored is on the treasures of the Deccan. She has also been instrumental in the museums and the palaces that have been refurbished. And she has been there all along. I think at the palace, one of the palaces in Hyderabad, which I also had the opportunity to visit way back. So I would love to see what it is now, the Chow Mahal, on which she has worked for some time, and along with her friends. Now, this love for art and museology has made her an entrepreneur. And she is one of our youngest entrepreneurs to launch an archive agency, which she calls the ECA Academy. It's called the ECA Academy. No, archiving, I'm sorry. It's called the ECA Archiving Academy. So here is an entrepreneur who has not stopped with just loving objects and taking photographs or co-authoring books, but has actually taken a big step in bringing to us the treasury of culture and history that is there all over India. Because this archiving agency takes up not only government enterprises, but also private and individual demands on curating. And curating, as we all know, is something that has to be studied in depth. Not everyone can do that. So she after her studies in the National Art Museum, she was awarded the Fulbright Fellowship, one of the prestigious awards of US. Then she went on to be awarded what is called the Ing Fellow, again related to curating and learning the art of curation. And as we all know, curating and reconstructing art and museology has to be technologically done because it's a technologically advanced field. So here is an individual who blends in her the scientific part of it as well, of technology to get these museum pieces alive for us. So with these words, I know that Deepthi is going to take us through the paintings of the iconic paintings of India and make us also aware of the beauty of Ravi Varma's paintings and little known Ravi Varma paintings, I should say. We all have seen a few of them in museums, but what comes alive is the history behind the paintings, the stories behind the paintings. And Deepthi, I'm sure, is going to open up that chapter for us on this forum in this webinar. So I'm sure that after hearing what she has been doing, all of us are anticipating and ready to, in fact, listen to Deepthi, who will take us, I'm sure, on a cultural heritage journey of India. So with these words and a warm welcome to Deepthi once again, I request Deepthi to start the talk. Thank you. Deepthi, are you there? I think something happened and Deepthi has gone off.
So while she has got disconnected, she'll come in again.
Yeah. While she is coming in, I have something else also to tell you that this cultural forum will have its next talk on architecture, as I said, and we have a very interesting title coming up. It is Architecture of Gods, Kings, and Mortals. So gods also had an architecture, kings also had one, and we mortals have tried to imitate and build on those architectures of the past. So what actually this forum is taking us into new fields, which we never thought of when we started the literary and cultural forum. You'll recall that we started off with Mr. Jayakumar's story of culture and literature, and he went back to all the romantic poets, and he himself, being a writer, told us about the beauty of poetry. And then we had storytelling, and Kalanidhi came in to talk about humor. Then we went on to talk about dance as an art form. Then we talked about the representation of women in films. And today we're talking about how Ravi Varma, as we know, always loved to paint women. And we are actually going to look at women in the paintings of Ravi Varma. Deepthi, have you joined us?
No, she hasn't come in again.
Okay. So while we are at it, I would actually like to call for suggestions from all of you who have joined here as to the kind of topics you would like us to deal with in the future for webinars that we have. So will you please put this in the chat box if you have anything in mind and which you think would be interesting. We'll try to get speakers on that.
Mila, you want to try calling Deepthi?
Yeah. Did you get it? I'm not getting her, Usha.
I think she must be trying to come in. I cannot see her name yet. We are waiting for Deepthi to rejoin us. She had already joined, but I think she got disconnected.
Deepthi is not taking the call.
Call Jayashree, Jamila.
Yeah, Jayashree വിളിക്കാം അല്ലേ?
Network is poor in that area.
ഹലോ ആ ദീപ്തി കയറാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ലേ ദീപ്തിക്ക്?
No, Jamila, now she's coming in. Deepthi is coming in. Yeah, she has joined.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry about that. That was like,
Yeah. Good to have you back. So you can start now. We were waiting for you. Welcome back.
So welcome Deepthi, and we are all eagerly waiting to hear you on paint from rock art to Ravi Varma and to the women in Ravi Varma's painting. So over to you, Deepthi. പിന്നെ പോയെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു ഇല്ലേ ഉഷ?
അയ്യോ.
No,
She's not there.
we can't see her. But
Can't
no,
see
she
her.
is gone. No, gone again.
ജയശ്രീ പറഞ്ഞത് അവരെ ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് പോയി, so they have called up the internet people and they are trying എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു.
No, Jayashree has joined again. She also went out and she has come back, but
അപ്പൊ എങ്ങനെയാ ജയശ്രീ എങ്ങനെ വന്നു? Maybe on her phone.
yeah, actually
4G മറ്റേ ഫോണിന്റെ ഇതിൽ വന്നു കാണും.
Maybe she can also try to join on the phone and
Just speak, പക്ഷേ കാണിക്കാതെ എങ്ങനെ?
no, Jayashree is coming in again. No, ask her to WhatsApp the presentation to me and I'll share the presentation.
Okay. Hello. And she can't send it on mail? Okay, okay. Usha,
Yeah,
will you put your mail address in the chat box so she can send it to you?
I'll do that.
WhatsApp padilla, so perhaps she can try the mail.
No, mail will be difficult because the file will be too big, you know. But
So
anyway,
WhatsApp big angle, it won't come through.
no, WhatsApp will send. But if the network is bad, then it will be difficult.
WhatsApp പറ്റില്ല എന്നാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. So then I said,
I'll put it in.
anyway, let her try. Let her try either.
No, Jamila, just send me her phone number on WhatsApp.
Okay. Apologies to all who have joined us on this platform. Please bear with us. We'll come back. We'll try to come back.
I think you keep talking, Jamila, about the forum, and in the meantime, we'll sort this out.
Just to continue with what I was saying, one of the things that we thought about when we began to think about literary and cultural forum was to bring to this forum, to this platform, not only different topics, but also different speakers who have in one way or another made a mark in their branch of study or in their branch of their professional branches. We started with Kairunisa, you will remember, as a storyteller. She is a children's storyteller. And her book, which is known as a series of books, which is known as Butterfingers, is very popular among children. So this forum was an attempt to look at how she crafted her novels, The Butterfingers, and how humor finds a place in children's literature. One of the things I think at that point I highlighted was that somehow during these COVID times, we have lost our sense of the comic, our ability to laugh, our ability to think not too seriously. Because one of the things that this has happened is because we have not been able to be with friends. We have not been able to be with our children who are far away. We were not able to communicate as we once did face to face. So a lot of changes have come in our lives, especially during the last 1 year. And in this last 1 year, I'm sure in all your lives, you must have noticed that life can become a routine, a kind of get up in the morning, then you do something, you're not going out of the house, and then it's already night for you to sleep. So you call up one or two friends, but it is not like being together. Even on our Zoom, where we would get 3 or 4 of our friends together, or on WhatsApp, it was not good enough. So that it's one way of saying that uh, we are all social beings, and as social beings, we need to link with one another. We need to see one another. We need to touch one another. I think Keats was right when he talked about the 5 senses as being an essential part of our life. Our ability to see the beauty of things, to feel the beauty, to touch and feel the beauty of things, to taste the things around us. And we all know we love tasting a lot of food items, to taste the different sweets, the different cuisines all over India, because India has a rich cuisine to offer. And because of our fear of going to hotels to take food, different kinds of food, and our inability to cook all those different kinds of food at home, actually we have also, our tastes have also become sort of, I would say, sour. We have lost that ability to really taste the fineness of rich food. Keats also talked about our sense of hearing. And today, as you are listening to me, I am a person who's on a screen for you. You really don't, even if you hear, you don't really hear. This is a sense of not being able to connect with people. Because whenever we talk about voices, when we talk about how sounds acquire meaning as they are transmitted through air and received by the hearer. There is a message that I want to communicate to you. I make the message in my mind. I put it into words, and sometimes very poetic words, and then I say it aloud to you. But what you hear and what you understand is based on your ability to interpret. So if you don't interpret, sometimes somebody might crack a joke and you don't interpret it as a joke. You think that they are making fun of you. Actually, that is the loss of communication between the speaker and the hearer. So even the simple act of talking, but this can be corrected if you are face to face. Like when you say it and you can watch the other's face it is a facial expression. And you can translate it, the speaker can translate it into words and perhaps apologize if they have hurt the other person. So in a way, this sense of not being able to see people, not being able to be in a world where we can laugh together, that is something that personally I have missed a lot, and I'm sure all of you have also missed a lot. So what we do is perhaps find solace in the nature around us, in the gardens that we have around us. Some of my friends know that I write poetry, and so it is the nature around me that actually sparks thought of line, and then I begin to write on it. And sometimes these words flow effortlessly, because I think it's a kind of language, the way we use language, the way we reconstruct our thoughts into words have much meaning and communication fervor in it. What do I want to communicate to my hearer when I am actually penning down a couple of lines? This is true of all poets. Remember, I had given a talk on Louis Gleek, who was the Nobel Prize winner of this year for literature. And one of the things that I noticed in her poetry was the way she was able to relate her thoughts to so many other things, to Greek mythology, to the nature around her, to the life around her, to the country, the village that she was representing. So opening up, what I'm trying to get at is that we need to open up our minds in these contained spaces that we find ourselves in. Otherwise, we would become very dull. We need to think out loud. We need to uh, put our thoughts into words. Now, these are all things that we feel that we have to uh, continuously work on. Otherwise, it won't come too instinctively. It will come, but it won't come too instinctively. And that is why we started this cultural forum, so that we could exchange our thoughts. We could communicate what each of us in a way had worked on, so that we could in fact learn things that was very different from, say, the mechanics of life, living from day to day, thinking only about what to cook. And as we are all women, I think in the morning when we get up, we have this feeling how to schedule the day. I was
Hello.
yes,
Jamil,
Deepthi, you are there?
yeah,
Oh,
she's back.
okay. So Deepthi is here with us.
Can you see my
And
screen?
I've made some meaning
Yes,
in
we
what I've
can.
been telling you. So over to you, Deepthi, and
Thank you so much.
switching off. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Rewind a bit and thank you for the warmest by-action ever. I don't really welcomed in any forum. I'm going to switch off my. It's okay, just because the internet is glitching here. I want you all to enjoy the talk. So I'm just going to stop my video. Please allow me, just so that you can enjoy this. And then I'll switch back on at the end of it. I'm so delighted to be here. A very warm thank you to my host and, of course, to the All India Women Conference for inviting me. Present painting traditions for India, where history millennia is always difficult. So, in the interest of time, I have a selection of painting, a treasury of sorts, the name for today's talk, which is Kalanidhi, which basically means a treasury of art. I do hope this brief talk is able to impress on you the variety, beauty, and unbroken continuity of paintings in India. To make it more interesting, I've chosen the theme of women in India in Indian painting, and also because of the forum that I am in today evening. And women and the feminine form essentially have a muse and an inspiration through time. So these portraits of women of India, while they're steeped in beauty and nostalgia, they also provide very how women were viewed and how they saw themselves. Something I feel is easily as important today as it was hundreds of years ago. Now, diving into a topic like paintings is really difficult because it is just, especially in a history and tradition as ours. Paintings in the civilization, and we find evidence of it in their pottery. But by its very nature, unlike sculptures or buildings, paintings do not last. So as we go further back in time, we find fewer and fewer examples that survive. Besides looking at paintings on the basis of time, we can also look at paintings on the basis of technique, because India has had a vibrant tradition of paintings executed also painting, which is replete with extraordinary details like the one that you see in front. These are often executed with brush, barely made up of like a single hair, two sometimes. And the word miniature, though, is a misnomer because small in size. They're sometimes as big as as high as a meter. But the name endures in today's genre, where there is an extraordinary indication of the fineness of work, is today called miniatures. They are also executed on manuscripts of palm leaf and paper, as well as on folios of cloth and paper. Of course, I'll also be showing you some paintings from what we today call modern and These are more familiar. They're made of canvas, wood, board, etc. And I will come back to these. And finally, I want to shine the light on the fact that painting traditions in India have always been associated with architecture, whether they were temples or caves, irrespective of whether they were Hindu or Buddhist or Islamic. Paintings would usually cover every given surface of a holy space. We know this today, both from scientific studies and other literary references. So I begin with such example, and this is from the famous Ajanta caves. These caves were built between 2 BC and 4 CE, and they present some of the oldest extant cave murals. The caves are numbered 1 to 30. There are around 30 located in rock caves that are in a horseshoe formation in present-day Maharashtra and Aurangabad. This painting, this particular painting that you're looking at is in Cave 1, which was built around Christian era 468. So you're looking at people and women from a really long time ago. And they are inspired by what are called as the Jataka tales. These are stories of the previous lives of the Buddha. And in this particular story that you look at, King Maya decided to renounce his kingdom and ascetic. And here his queen, Shivali, is attempting to stop her king. And even though this is a detail, you can look at the intricacy of both contemplation. So the entire cave complex is this extraordinarily beautiful place of costumes as well as other details. What is remarkable in Ajanta, all social strata. There are queens, there are maids, there are attendants, musicians. This particular mural that you see in front of you is of a dancer woman. You can see, if you look closely in her skirt, the patterns of ikat, and they give indications and clues of how over close to 3,000 years, our traditions of jewelry and costume have somehow miraculously continued. This is present in very few other parts of the world. And there are, of course, also paintings, other cave paintings in other locations, Ellora in Elephanta near Bombay, Imbetka, which is actually the oldest known, but they are more akin to stick figures and not very beautiful to look at. Caves at Bagh, Badami, Arma Malai, and so on. So this is a snapshot of the earliest cave paintings. I'm going to move on a little ahead, and we move now to the 11th and 12th centuries, to the Pala school. It's important because of the earliest surviving examples of miniature paintings on Buddhism had given birth to some of the greatest Mahaviras. These are universities, palaces, and places of learning like the Nalanda, Odantapuri, Vikramashila, and Somarupa. And as religion was propagated, there was this great desire to spread. Remember, this is an era before printing. Anything that had to be converted and communicated as a word had to be hand painted. So in these 2 centuries, in the 11th, the flowering and presence of hundreds of manuscripts, and more importantly, hand illustrated. So what you see in front of you is actually a manuscript, hand painted, hand lettered, and created completely for the purposes of religious instructions. This is the goddess Mamaki with a vajra or a lotus in her hand. And this is a folio from one of the surviving manuscripts. It's called as the Ashta Sahasrika Prana Paramita Sutra manuscript. It's basically a philosophical treatise on Mahayana Buddhism. But what you see here is the goddess Mamaki, who's known as the greedy goddess Mamaki, and she who makes, and I quote, everything her own. So you'll see in when we look at paintings, it's the colors and the expressions and often what they hold in their hands that actually indicates who the god or the goddess is. And today, of course, is dedicated to all the goddesses. And so I move on. So even as Buddhism is spreading its philosophy and thoughts with these manuscripts, in other parts of the country, in Rajasthan and further south, Hindu manuscripts were also being painted. What you see here in front of you is a 11th century folio from the Chaura Pansika, very important, was one of the oldest surviving manuscripts. It translates in English to 50 verses of the thief. And it is so called because it's essentially a love story of the Kashmiri poet Bilhan, who actually impersonates himself as a thief, and he falls in love for a princess. And the entire manuscripts are just these interludes of how Bilhan manages to meet this royal princess. But it is also a telling insight into how royal women lived. You see Champavati as her name is, and you can see that on the inscription over her head, how she lived, what she wore, play, how did she pass her time. So it's a very insightful window into a period that is today lost. From Western India, this again is another manuscript, a Jain painting this time. And you can see, again, the combination of text as well as painting. I have a detail of the same painting that we just looked at. You can see the Queen Trishala, who is the mother to Mahavira, who founded Jainism actually, nursing the little infant Mahavira. And while above, in another narrative, the infant is being rocked in a swing cradle by two handmaids. So if you look at the top register of the thing, you can see that happening, the little baby in the cradle. And I must point out here that these flat folios were dismissed by the Western world, and these paintings were dismissed as being ugly. But the fact is that Indians simply looked at painting and narrative storytelling in a different way. So very many scenes, episodes of stories that were already known to the population would be crammed into a tiny space, a visual reminder really of looking at storytelling. But as Muslim invaders come to India around this time in waves, they come looking for the fabulous wealth and better living. And eventually, as you all know, they were to make it their home and integrate into the population. But as the first waves came in, they brought their influences from Central Asia and Persia. It's seen in the food, it was seen in the clothing, and of course, it was seen in the art. By the time the great Mughal kings had established their empire in North India by the 15th century, they set new standards of refinement and opulence that actually continue to inspire to this day. In the Western world, even today, it's the most considered as the high point of both aesthetics as well as refinement. The rulers, Babur, Akbar, Shah Jahan, they commissioned some of the most extravagant art and architecture projects. And with the exception of Aurangzeb, all the emperors had great painters in their court. And for the flourishing of art, you must remember, you must always need great patronage. And we'll come back to that as to why people ask, is there no great art today? So we'll come back to that. And Akbar, for example, he commissioned the retelling of the Mahabharata as an illustrated manuscript. It was called the Razmnama, but he also commissioned others like the Hamza Nama, the Timur Nama, the Babur Nama. Nama literally means the story of Babur. So on the screen in front of you, on the left is actually a folio from the Hamza Nama, and you can see the kind of Central Asian in the tile work of the trees. And this is basically a story based very loosely on the life of the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. And it's the fantastic adventures of Hamza as he and his band of heroes fight against the enemies of Islam. Be a whole talk about itself, but it's some stupendous storytelling from the 14th century. See on the tree, what's happening is that the witch Ankurat is in the guise of a very beautiful woman, and she's hoping to seduce the legendarily handsome young Malikirai, which very pragmatically, she's actually just tied him to the tree. So I think that's one way of making the seduction work. And on the right side, if you see, is and the Mughal court was exceedingly welcoming Akbar, especially of for philosophies. And you see a painting of the Virgin Mary executed in the Mughal style. We now know, of course, that famous painters like Rembrandt had these miniatures in their collection. But here were traditional painters actually trying to look at light and shade, trying to look at Christian themes, and really anything that was coming into the court, delving into this kind of a romantic era. Jahangir and Shah Jahan especially was a diehard. Already know this from the Taj Mahal, but he was a true patron in terms of the romantic arts, not just with painting, but with music and with scripts as well as architecture. So on the folio, on the screen in front of you, on the left and right are two examples of how the exquisite beauty with which women did. On she holds a flower. The delicacy of these paintings, really, you have to hold them in your hand to admire them. Right down to the detailing of her velvet embroidered slippers, to the transparency of the washing garment of the woman on the right. These paintings are some of the greatest treasures. And today, unfortunately, many are in leading private collections around the world. And you'll see, even as I take you through some of these images, that they are in Boston and Paris and so on. In the Mughal court, women were, of course, depicted. There is a constant question that comes up is like, were women ever shown? Yes, not wore exquisite clothes. The king's zanana, as it was called, however, was veiled and were never explicitly shown in paintings. So what we know of the Mughal times of the women is actually of the musicians, the attendants, the maids, the visitors to the court. And if you look at the detail, so on the left is a folio from the famous Mughal painting compilation known as the Padshanama. This is from the 1656. And on the right, I've pulled out a detail. So if you see here, these women who are standing here, that's the detail that's on the right. You'll notice that all their faces are more or less identical. And they all have these kind of pinched waists and voluptuous bodies. Now, this was an idiom that was just chosen by the Mughal artists to show women. If you contrast it for the men, for example, every face has a distinct detail, and we believe that they were actually based on real characters who were there in the court. But when it comes to women, it's a more of they were depicted in great detail, but the faces in all the paintings more or less look the same. Move a little away from Mughal India of the 15th, 16th centuries and go westwards. And this folio that you see here is an from Mewar, which is present-day Udaipur, and of course its surrounding geographic area, where painting has survived in the royal courts right up to present-day times in the palace, still accessible for study. And what you're looking at is one of the most beautifully illustrated Ramayanas. It was presented by Maharana Bhim Singh of Mewar to a Colonel James Todd. And the Mewari paintings, like I said earlier, rejected the vertical. In one painting, many things are happening at the same time. You're seeing the inside, you're seeing the outside. So this, for example, is an episode from the Ramayana. So Lakshman and Sita have resolved to go into exile with Rama, and seated in the pavilion on the left, which you see here, Sita is actually just destroying all her jewels. She's giving big ones and the clothes to the Brahmin Suyajna and his, and you know the same people repeat, because when you see it page after page, the same faces reappear, much like at album photographs today. And in the pavilion on the right, you can see Rama and Lakshmana. They are giving away their jewels, horses, elephants, camels. The Brahmin Trijata throwing his staff to the other side of the river, and he receives all the cattle between him and it. Only the prince's weapons are not given away. So they have stripped off of all their royal. They just have the ascetic garment of a simple dhoti. And you must remember, this is one folio and one episode. And often these compilations would be 80, 90 illustrated folios. So they are a real joy to look at. And with the wonder of technology today, most of them are available online. So if the Ramayana interests you and you're familiar with it, or any of the ancient manuscripts, they are today available to look at and admire. Here's another one that I just wanted to show. So on the top register, you would have the episode that was being shown. This is from the Geet Govinda, and you can of course see this is the story of Krishna, who's always identifiable because of his lovely blue skin. And he's easy to spot for us, but I wanted you to look at the beauty of the foliage. When you look at them long enough, you begin to recognize the trees. They look very stylized, but every flower, every detail is actually identifiable. Is, and I'm now moving a little north from Mewar. Even as the Mughal court was flourishing, smaller Hindu courts were also giving patronage to artists and artisans. And you have the flowering in the 17th, mid-17th, 18th century of a lot of regional, what we call schools of painting. Extraordinary work is being produced. And this particular painting is a national treasure. It's at the National Museum in Delhi, one of its most popularly visited paintings in the gallery. This is from the school of Kishangarh, which was a small court today in present-day Rajasthan. And before photography was invented, the only way to record visual memory was a painting, or of course a sculpture in its many forms. Both were also accessible only to the very rich patrons, or as a limited expression of creativity. Kishangarh School, and I wanted to show this to you in detail, is known for its intense stylization. So if you see, there's a very pointed, sharp nose, a small mouth, and these typical elongated eyes, together with this locks of hair that look like serpents. And these were to become the idioms of female beauty, and they crept stories, manuscripts into the poetry, and so on. The woman in this picture, the Bunny Thani, is actually believed to be a real historical figure, and she was the muse for the King Savan Singh, who fell in love with her. But the king was an ardent devotee of the Vallabhacharya sect. They are basically worshippers of the Krishna, and he just transferred his religious passion onto his court painters. So many of the paintings that come from Kishangarh are the metamorphical love between Radha and Krishna. Further up in the north is also a grand flowering of schools that were just called as the Pahadi school, from literally Pahad or the mountains. And this term is loosely used to connote a bunch of regional schools that were all located in the hills, present-day Himachal Pradesh, foothills of Uttar Pradesh, and so on. And these were the schools of Basoli, Guler, Kangra, Chamba, Mandi, Gadwal, and so on. Pahadi school was also, of course, greatly influenced by the Mughal school. In fact, when the Mughal Empire started collapsing, many artisans from the Mughal court went to the hills to continue their craft. The hero amongst these painters was a man by the name of Nain Sukh. His very name means Nain Sukh, or peace of eyes, and his paintings, a detail of which I've shown on this screen, were extraordinarily beautiful that today even to acquire a simple painting would be sometimes close to, lakhs and lakhs of rupees. So, and it's for the fineness and delicacy of it. Here's just another quick, just to contrast it. Here, Shiva and Parvati are encamped, and you can see Parvati is almost been made into a lotus-like form. And there was a lot of use of metaphor. So if you see the trees on the top are meeting and they're flowering, it shows the union. Her eyes are closed in bliss. And of course, and the animals, there's a fire burning slowly in the front, and the animal looks away almost diplomatically. I'll move on. Oh, here's another example. This is of Krishna and Radha. Many are today, you see them, they have continued to be used, reproduced, they become prints, and they're seen on all around us. But this legendary love, this is from Pahadi, a Pahadi school again, from the National Gallery of Art in Australia, where Krishna is lovingly sorting the tresses of Radha. And these paintings are extraordinarily beautiful. And you see here almost the two trees. Once you know how to look for the signs, these paintings become extraordinarily enjoyable because you're just reading a different kind of visual language, which, like I said, in other genres translates into poetry and so on. I move south. You're all familiar with the Tanjore painting and its myriad forms. So I decided to skip that and move to what is also a Tanjore school, from the Tanjore school. This is later, from 1790, when the Portuguese had captured south of India, and they began commissioning local artists. It quickly moved to the British, and these commissions in the 18th, 19th centuries were called the company style. For the first time now, we have a documentation of, because it was being done by outsiders, they're in terms of beauty, they're kind of flat, as we call them. But in terms of capturing detail of costume, jewelry, as well as of the racial types and nuances, they're absolutely extraordinary. I move on. This painting that you see here is of an Indian princess. This is from circa 1800. So we are now coming closer to our times. Western influences start coming to India. So you have painters who come to India, settle here, and begin to paint local inspirations and subjects. But what is extraordinary is that they bring with them their idiom of English and British painting. In this particular painting of a little princess, you can see she's wearing the traditional dress. She's wearing a little choli, a heart-shaped opening at her neck, the tight topi or the cap that was worn both by little girls and little boys. But notice what she holds in her hand. She holds these blue flowers. And blue flowers at the time in painting represented hope and the beauty of things. So how he takes a typically Indian subject and at the same time slips in a quiet message that is from his world. Hickey also lived in India for some time, and he took on what was known as a bibi or a consort. And he was very, very attached to her. In fact, he said of her, and I quote, "She lived with me, respected and admired by all her friends for her extraordinarily sprightliness and great humor. Unlike the women in Asia, she never secluded herself from the sight of strangers." And this was, as you can see, painted in 1787. And for the next 100 years, almost all the white European men who lived in India took on native local women, and many enjoyed the status equivalent to that of a wife. But unlike a woman from, at the time, the elite classes at the time, she had the rare privilege of being seen in public. So, these were women who were wealthy in their own right. They ran their households. Their husbands were extraordinarily powerful. They too in their own right. And what's remarkable is that they actually commissioned their own paintings. Here, of course, Hickey himself painted his wife. Speaking of elite women, I move to the actual elite. This is also the time that Western painting idiom is taken into formally commissioned portraits. And this is the Maharani of Coach Bihar, 1887, done by a artist known as Hall. The Maharani of Coach Bihar, Suniti Devi, was the eldest daughter of Keshav Chandra Sen, who was a religious reformer. Coach Bihar is actually in northern India, in the area between Bangladesh, Assam, and Bhutan. She married the Maharaja, had I think 7 children, and she actually visited England for the Queen's Jubilee celebrations. The Queen Victoria actually makes note of her in her diary, saying that she was an extraordinarily beautiful woman. She was also an educationist and a women's rights activist in her own right, something that she brought over from her childhood upbringing. And so that's the Maharani of Coach Bihar. And of course, we cannot ignore at this time, one of the greatest Indian artists makes his appearance, and that's Raja Ravi Verma. What you see in front of you is the Maharani Jamnabai Sahib of Baroda, or the Maharani Gaikwad. The women of Baroda were extraordinarily powerful, emancipated. They would hunt, they were educated, they took decisions in the state's affairs. Rani Chimnabai, in fact, when her husband Khanderao died suddenly, and her brother-in-law rather, succeeded the throne, Maharani didn't bat an eyelid. She deposed him, adopted a young boy from within the family, and she played regent to him till much later, and the young boy grew up to be Sayajirao Gaikwad III, and under whose stewardship Baroda prospered immensely. Ravi Verma at the time was also, of course, delving into this explosion of mythical subjects and ideas. And what you're looking at here is the famous painting of Shakuntala looking back to glimpse Dushyanta. Ravi Verma is credited with bringing back into popularity many of the traditional mythologies and myths. And you see here, many art historians have written about it, but really the beauty of it is all that remains to be seen. Shakuntala looks back with hope and longing. She is waiting for Dushyanta, who she hopes. She's pretending to remove a thorn, but all she is doing is buying time to just look back and perhaps get a glimpse of him. But you also see that realism is coming in. Photography by this time is established. And the painting idioms are now not flat anymore. There is depth of perspective. There's a complete departure, therefore, from the earlier miniature paintings. And as you can see, there's light and shadow on her face, plus, of course, a kind of naturalness to the proportions that was not there in the earlier miniature paintings. There are also other foreign practicing artists in India who are bringing now, and they're abandoning this Western idiom and capturing native subjects really as they are. This is a fantastic photograph of a young girl a little girl really, standing in a veranda wearing a Pochampalli sari. This is today in the collection of the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art and will soon be on view post-pandemic. But you can see the detail of both the saris as well as of her jewelry. These paintings, besides of course their aesthetic beauty, are also today great sources for revival of a lot of our traditional heritage and of how women of all ages really wore the traditional costumes. So these are, I absolutely love this. And here I've just pulled up parallel references at the same time of a photograph. So you can see the ear ornaments as well as the detailing of the neck and head ornaments that little girls at the time actually did wear jewelry of this nature, and it was not an exaggeration. And on the extreme right, of course, the rare Pochampalli sari, which is a hand-woven creation. We move on. This is another extraordinary story, one of my favorites. The painting on the left is an absolutely beautiful painting, and at a private chapel in Buckingham Palace in 1852, Queen Victoria baptized an Indian princess to Christianity in the presence of her family and directors of the East India Company. And this little girl was actually the 11-year-old Princess Gauramba, daughter of the last Raja of Coorg. She had to embrace a new religion as per her father's wishes, who of course had his own reasons. But the event was absolutely momentous, and the East India Company representatives made a big deal of it, to the point that Queen Victoria commissioned a painting. So if you see the painting, the princess is actually holding a Bible in her hand, showing her newly adopted religion. And if you look at her sari, it's intricately, finely pleated, but that was exactly the way. If you look at her belt and a photograph on the right of one of the Mysore princesses, you will see that the pleating of the saris as well as the belt ornament are absolutely spot on. Today, I mean, not today, but 50 years ago, scholars were very skeptical whether these jewels actually existed. But now with the emergence of photography and other details, we do know, in fact, that these fabulous paintings were actually absolutely spot on. And I will, that's another photograph. So this is how Princess Gaurama actually looked in her real life. She had to wear Victorian dresses. She had to go to church. She actually wore no jewelry after she left India. That photograph is by the famous photographer Roger Fenton. We are in 1860 now. And you can see that she grew up, she went on to marry a British man, but it was a very stark departure from her earlier royal life. And of course, my ode, again, another Ravi Varma painting of the Maharani Bharani Tirunal Lakshmi Bai, immortalized in a Ravi Varma painting, and alongside with the photograph that actually inspired that painting. She was born in 1848 to a branch of the Royal Travancore family, and she and her sister Parvati Bai were adopted into the direct matrilineage of the Travancore royals. They were known as the senior and junior Ranis of Artingal. But what I want you to look at is, of course, the painting, and I'm sure Ravi Varma had this photograph for inspiration. She, in turn, is actually trying to look like Queen Victoria. I'm sure she had a tough time figuring out how the gown actually came together. So it was her own concoction. And then Ravi Varma, with the skill of his brush, jazzes it up a little bit more. But you'll see basically it's a frilled full skirt, and then there's just this rich fabric draped around. She's also got this badge of honor called the Imperial Crown, Order of the Crown of India. It's an order of chivalry. And it was given to her by Queen Victoria. And she joined the company of other queens like Maharani Bamba Singh of Lahore, and whom you met earlier, the Maharani Jamna Bai Sahib of Baroda. So you'll see that it says VRI for Victoria Regent something. And okay, let's move. Now I'm going to jump from Travancore to Bengal. We're in 1875, and we're looking at a genre of paintings that was known as the Kalighat paintings. What's extraordinary is that these paintings are still done. The one on the left that you see is from 1875. And they're very simple paintings done on mill-made paper, just these bold brush strokes and bold colors, often made by the artist in the home itself. And they originated in the vicinity of the Kalighat temple in Calcutta, which is why they're called the Kalighat paintings. But, you know, the art is always depicted Hindu gods, but they also do these fun takeoffs on incidents, themes, and characters from everyday life. And this particular series of a wife beating her husband is still today somehow extraordinarily popular, but they also give you an insight into the role and status of the women in lower middle class Bengali families. And on the right, which is a 10-year-old painting from 2010, actually is what is simply just titled as a tiger woman. I think it's absolutely extraordinary. This woman who looks like a tiger and is just sniffing a rose. It's quite nice. I must briefly pause, and with this, I bring you into the 20th century. The 20th century, art always reflects the changing political times and dilemmas of our time. And the 1920s and 30s was a resurgence on one hand of nationalism and looking for meaning as an independent India for the freedom fighters. And on the other side, for the elite rulers, it was trying to cope up and find patronage and acceptance by the British. So what you see here is the Maharani of Indore, Sanyogita Devi. She, along with her husband, lived their lives half in Europe, in Paris and in London, and half in Indore, which was their home. They were both educated as well as had exposure abroad. And the portraiture that they commissioned, this is done by a French artist by the name of Boutet de Montbel. You can see that she could pass off, except for her skin color and her dark hair, as any European princess. She wears the extraordinary Indore pears. Those are real diamonds that the family had. And while in this portrait, she is in an extraordinarily Western attire, in this one, also done by the same artist, she wears the Maharashtrian Nauwari, which you earlier saw the Baroda Queen wearing, but in a very stylish, out-of-the-box painting format. These paintings actually went on to influence, and amongst artists, once a trend began, as it continues to this day, very many others were also commissioned. And so I think this was absolutely beautiful. I move on to Amrita Shergill, who again was an artist who was born in Hungary and is today regarded as one of the 9 iconic artists in India. Her artworks are considered national treasures, and if they are in India, they cannot leave India, exactly like Ravi Verma's works. On the left is a painting that was done by her in 1935. It's today at the National Gallery of Modern Art in Delhi, and it depicts a group of 3 girls. It was her ode and her homage to her roots. On the right is a recreation of it by the poet Rupi Kaur, who saw inspiration in it. This is a fairly recent photo from 2 years ago. Saw inspiration in it for the Punjabi diaspora, and with what is happening and in our country right now, this particular painting has found new meaning and resonance for both the Punjabi diaspora abroad as well as for those here, because Amrita Shergill also straddled these 2 worlds of always being seen as a European here and being seen as an Indian there. But she was an avant-garde artist whose works are extremely sought after. This is a self-portrait by her, which was done by her when she was very young in 1933. I think she was 19 or 20 at the time. And you can see why it's such an extraordinary portrait. She's painted herself, but her choice of using what was then considered a daring red lipstick, as well as the direct gaze, was unknown in portraiture at the time. The tilted face just looking towards the camera. Another iconic Indian beauty who straddled India and the world, as I see it, this was painted by Svetoslav Rorik, and the woman in the painting is Devika Rani, Indian silver screen's first superstar, iconic beauty. She went on to, she was married in Europe, it didn't work out, and second time she married Rorik, who was a Russian. Today, their estate is scattered between the Nagar Hills in Himachal and in Bangalore. But few paintings of her survive, but they are considered extremely prized because Rorik did not paint very many portraits. And you can see how he paints his wife's stellar beauty in this profile. I also want to, then on to the last few slides. This is actually an artist who was Indian and post-partition, Chugtai. Post-partition, he was designated, he chose to live in Pakistan. And Chugtai's paintings were extraordinary because I spoke to you about the Mughal paintings, but in the 1940s, he actually brings back that kind of Mughal delicacy and idiom. But his paintings stand out because of this consistency of a tonal wash. On the left, you see the one that is, it's all a pale green. He's shown his theme of characters is also interesting. He's shown Jahanara here. Now, Jahanara was Shah Jahan's daughter, but she was also extraordinarily independent because she was actually a woman who was, who would be admired even today. She was an architect. She planned the Chandni Chowk in Delhi. There's a fantastic book by the name Daughters of the Sun by Ira Mukhoti, and you must read it. It'll show you how she was a woman in a man's world, Shah Jahan's favorite daughter. She, however, could not mediate peace between her brothers. And when Shah Jahan was banished to die, she chose to accompany him till his last days. And there's another famous artwork that I haven't shown, which is called The Last Moments of Shah Jahan, which is done by Abindranath. 1960 now, and we are looking at Jamini Roy, who's bold. He was inspired by the earlier Kalighat paintings that you saw, but he takes both mythical as well as modern day themes and translates them into this completely new style. Like you can see these elongated eyes, and that's Radha and Krishna on the Yashoda and Krishna on the right, and a woman, a Gopini in her yellow sari on the left. And you can just see why his style was so path-breaking. Now we come to, so the painting on the extreme right that you see is called the Mahishasura Mardini, and it was done by an artist called Tayyab Mehta. And it sold for $1.28 million. And this is a question I get asked all the time as to why modern, seemingly insensible paintings sell for such high prices. But if you see, it is iconic for many reasons. One, the artist Tayyab Mehta came back to this theme, which is that of the goddess Kali killing the demon Mahishasur. And he came back to this painting. There are several iterations of it that are available. He visited Shantiniketan as a Muslim artist. He was deeply inspired by ancient mythology and Hindu literature, which in itself is a bit of a standalone unique feature. And Mahishasura, it's the recounting of the legend whereby the Brahmin king Rambha produces an invincible son through an union with a she-buffalo. So that's a little metamorphical. But nonetheless, why it is iconic is because I think Tayyab succeeds in taking a theme that has been a part of Indian Hindu mythical depiction for over 2,000 years and suffuses it with a kind of a new energy that was on par and in his time with contemporary artists like Picasso. I don't want to get into the art history of it, but you can see how it's an age-old theme, but it is retold in a new way. There is the Mahishasura and killing the demon, the choice of the colors, the breaking up of the background, and so on. And I close my my presentation with these two more recent paintings, also two women artists. And two I think path-breaking works. On the left with the blue background is an artist who is known as Rekha Rodivitia. She's based in Baroda, path-breaking because she basically looks at surrealism and magical realism, but she chooses to bring women's issues and thoughts to the fore. You will always find her picking up the most controversial subjects, but choosing to voice her power through her art. Leaning very heavily towards women figures and women issues. I think Rekha's work is absolutely extraordinary, and she does it in these stark blocking colors. If you see, there isn't extraordinarily, there's not much of clutter, these blank screens and very simple, clear lines. And on the right, someone you might already know, Anjali Ella Menon, who in her 50, 60-year career has done, again, some extraordinary artworks. In fact, in her words, she says that I always define Shakti as women power. And the Western view of feminism tries to appropriate male power. But Indian women have a strong sense of power that was not physical, but based on sacrifice and fecundity, to not only produce, but nurture, important for universal balance. And so we have the strong images of Durga and Kali. And so I like that take of her, of how she chooses to portray the power of women as life givers. And with that, I close my photo book, and I hope that the powerful personas of these women stay with you and their beauty inspires you, not just with who they were, but how many of them used it to better their own lives and others. And I apologize again for the internet and for having to make you wait. I think it was unfortunate, but I was at one point thinking if I'd be able to do this, but I'm so glad that the rest of it went off well.
So thank you, Deepthi, for that visual treat and that passionate narration. One can sense your love of photography and paintings in the way you narrated and the stories you told us about each of those paintings. And I'm sure that those who have joined us would have something to ask her. We are now opening the forum for discussion. Please unmute yourself and ask.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Deepthi, this was really, quite fantastic.
Thank you.
The examples in the paintings were just, fabulous. One of the things that they say about Indian paintings is that we had all flat paintings, till the Europeans brought their art, and that our art had no depth at all. In fact, the early paint, we only showed the profile of people. We never showed a frontal kind of a face. And of course, I think in Ajanta, that was sort of, belied in the sense you do see the frontal face of people. But generally, for a long time, even all the Jain and Buddhist art had only this, the profile shown.
That's right.
So what is your comment on this? And when did we sort of start changing?
Yeah. Like I said, we, because of the nature of painting, because they are painted on walls and because they are painted on essentially materials that deteriorate, the further back that you go back in time, we lose. I opened my talk by saying that. So if you're looking at the second, third, the first 10 centuries, really, we have very few examples. However, the surviving cave paintings, as they are called, or the rock paintings, as you rightly pointed out, show an extraordinarily detailed understanding of architecture, perspective, a roundedness of figures, and so on. You must also understand that we had other art forms at our disposal. I haven't touched on sculptures, and in our country, these were not in isolation. You would blend seamlessly from sculptures, which also often were colored, and we just see them as plain blank stone sculptures, but they too were covered with lime plaster. They too were colored, much like the Greek marbles. So we had this vibrant tradition. And then when it came to miniature paintings, like I said, there was a real need to cram in as much information as possible. So, and they weren't intended as portraits. And I think the difference arose mainly from the purpose of which it was created. At the highest level, paintings like the Padshanama were meant for the patron, these little pieces that are really like jewels. There's so much gold used. They would hold them on the lap and look at them. And at other levels where it was, the Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic philosophies or guides that were being printed out, they had to be, as manuscripts, they had to be portable. But of course, to answer your question, as we perceive it today, when did it start coming in? I think it was with the coming in of the trade routes in the 16th, 17th centuries, as more and more material both came in and survives today. So I must always stress on that we don't know how it was. There are references in our written texts that allude to paintings, but of course we will never know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, Deepthi, I was very interested in the last one that you showed, about Picasso debt to the painting that you showed. I think that painting actually has a lot of influence of the West rather than...
Hugely. Tayeb lived in Paris and he worked with the greats and this kind of, in fact, it was the coming of photography actually, as you know, that shifted it to all of the great artistic movements of the past 150 years. Because there was no need now more to show realism, a photo could do that. Artists were free to dip into their creativity. And all of the movements of Impressionism and Picasso, Pointillism, Cubism, all the isms were actually a direct offshoot of that. So yes, Tayeb lived in the West. They were all, I choose to see them as not as East or West, but global citizens, because I think that really defines a true artist, to be able to look at something very objectively and then just pour their heart into it, irrespective of the medium. It's paintings here, but it could be sculpture, it could be a video, cinema, anything.
Yeah, like Raza. No?
Like Raza. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
This is Rama Anantram. Deepthi, your presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
And I wanted to tell you, I wonder if you've seen the Mysore Museum.
I have.
Maharajas Museum.
I have.
So we have some of the very old paintings from much before Ravi Varma, some of them more sketches and how the Maharanas and the royalty of the Mysore was painted. So I think this museum and the presentation culture came after the British presented it to India. So they warped most of our ancient paintings, like they did with our libraries, etc. The Muslim invasion, the British invasion, and all that. So we had excellent painting, and some of it you can see in Kalamkari work towards Tirupati if you go there. And then the artists, they still have some of their ancient paintings, which they have formed into blocks today. That is one. And towards the deep Andhra, there's a place called Etikopaka. There also some of the paintings of the, they were all at the beach sides. Before the invasion of this, the Dutch, the British, the French, and the Muslim, we had an excellent art in our country itself. The kind of paintings that you see in the Mewar, etc., even in the Mysore, Belur Halebeed, you didn't cover that. There are excellent paintings there also of Rani Padmini and all. The painting.
Absolutely.
The colors that they have mixed are alive today, shining. And somebody said they're just flat. No, they're not. You can see them coming alive. The paintings in the Beluru Halebeed and the Mysore Museum, and some of these places in Mangalore, where some of them are preserved even today. Amazing work is still on. Perhaps now with the onset of this social media, if you could ask for ancient paintings in some of the traditional homes, maybe you'll hit upon much more of this art, which I happened to see by chance. Yeah. And your work is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. And keep the good work going on. God bless.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to add, you're absolutely spot on. But I think it is also, I mentioned that art at its very heart is fueled by patronage. So if you want to create
well said.
Yeah. So if you want great art, it has to be both funded, and of course, you also need more money to preserve it. So while we have examples like the ones that you mentioned, I wouldn't be so unkind to the foreign past that came from the discovery of Ajanta, which was done by a British man, to the documentation of most of the painting traditions that are done. It was done by the zeal of them. And it was also a changing style. There are fabulous examples still at Sri Rangam, the places that you mentioned. But I think that's where all of us come in. You have to want to preserve it. These are in somebody's backyard and nobody wants to have to do anything with it. While they are equally happy to go into the more modern palaces Mysore, Mewar, Jodhpur, Jaisalmer, Jaipur. These are all palaces from 18th, 19th century. That's it. That's 250 years. While if you look at our oldest mosques or temples, they go back a good 800, 900 years. So it's also the choice of we as a population and through our mandate, what we choose to preserve. So I think it just goes the full circle. But yeah, you're right. I think if you popularize it, maybe it will come back into style. I certainly.
Yeah, that is true, Deepthi, especially the huge mural paintings that you have on the walls of Mysore Palace, as Rama Devi was saying.
Yeah, they need a lot of money. I can also tell you, so these are the pretty slides, but on the flip side of it, where I work in trying to keep them together, specialists train for up to 10 to 15 years to learn how to preserve them, but then nobody wants to fund what they would like to see preserved, but that's just how it is.
I thought the government had provided some funding for this preservation of doing of the ancient buildings and all that. So in Telangana, quite a
they
few
do,
of
but
these
it's like preservation. Yeah, I'm part of, I kind of shadow some of these, but they are essentially, it's to spread too thin. We have hundreds of monuments that need preservation. Until there is public participation, like other parts of elsewhere in the country or the world, like Italy or Spain, it's not going to happen. I really believe in that. I mean, each of you, wherever you are, you will just close your eyes and there'll be something older than 500 years within an hour's driving distance. So it's as simple as that. I think everybody has to take a initiative.
There are several comments in the chat box. Jamila, would you like to read them out?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. They're all compliments. So I think
there are a lot of compliments. Very nice, excellent. Lakshmi Bai says gripping, engrossing, and well articulated. Radhika says, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Chitra says, fantastic, excellent, enjoyed, thank you. Usha Rajagopal says, Deepthi, your presentation was excellent. It shows your passion for the subject and how deep you have gone into the history of these paintings. Fantastic, Deepthi. Kalyani Raj says, Deepthi, you took us to a complete different world. Lovely paintings and passionate narration. Thank you so much. Supriya Beli Rao says, excellent presentation, Deepthi, well studied and presented, thoroughly enjoyed it. And Geeta says, excellent presentation, Deepthi, your explanations are very clear. Thank you. Yes, the explanations were really clear and articulated so well.
Thank you. And I just wanted to tell, you mentioned in the beginning about Ravi Verma. My Ravi Verma talk is already there on YouTube. I think I'll send you the link. Yeah. So if anyone wants to listen to just Ravi Verma, that's already out there, which is why I didn't go back to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
We all would love to kindly send it.
That will be wonderful.
I'll send
Thank
it
you.
across. Yeah, but that was early, I think last year. So I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that was a wonderful talk.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else want to unmute?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Deepthi, thank you so much. It was very great. I really loved it. Just like I loved your presentation on Raja Ravi Verma. I just wanted to ask you one thing. If you take all the paintings, not just women in painting, if you take the nature and everything, all the scenes and everything, would it have the same progression in the style of painting like the one that you just did, women in painting? If you take painting as a whole, including everything, nature and sceneries and everything, would it follow the same pattern, same progression, I mean?
Yeah, so for this presentation, I chose, because it's also a lay audience, I chose to do it chronologically because it makes sense. And the beauty of Indian painting traditions and material is so vast that I could really pick and choose beautiful slides without any problem at all. But to answer your question, there are very many filters through which you can look at a similar presentation. And by that, I mean, you can look at it through philosophy. So I could look at philosophy in Indian painting. I could look at religion in Indian painting, which would, I think, crystallize into several episodes. You can look at nature, or for that matter, even technique and process, which is typically how we look at Indian paintings. So the hill schools had a distinct style based on the materials they used. You can also look at paintings, whether they were done on manuscripts, palm leaf, wood, board, canvas, cloth. That's a whole another area. I think you mentioned kalamkari little earlier. We spoke about it in our discussion. Block printed textiles, like the lines get so blurred that it's very difficult to define what is art, what is mechanical process, what is architecture, what is decoration. And that's peculiar to India and culture. That would be India, China, and eastwards, really. So yes, so to answer your question, it would be no problem whatsoever. And it will not be much different.
Thank you, Deepthi.
You're welcome.
Hello.
I think,
I think you want to ask something.
The Odisha art, where, the red mud, the background of the red mud,
I'm very happy that I could participate. I'm actually traveling. So I was not sure whether I will be having the network, and I could really say it was really.
I think Bhuvneshwari is traveling, so her network.
Very good presentation for paintings, the period chosen participate, and thank you, Jamila, for organizing it. I'm not audible, I think.
Yeah, your voice is breaking.
Yeah, but we got your message. Thank you, Bhuvneshwari. And that was a compliment. That was a compliment for Deepthi. So
okay, thank you. I was waiting for the question.
Compliments.
I was waiting for the question. Thank you so much.
I think, Deepthi, in that painting which Bhuvneshwari was referring to, that
I didn't get her question. Just can you repeat it?
I didn't get it. She said something about that ikat, that girl wearing that, sari and the jewelry, and you have juxtaposed the painting, the photograph, and a sari.
Yeah.
That sari, I think, is a Kanchipuram, Ayaram Butti sari.
Okay, I'm going to make a note. It's not a Pochampalli.
No, it's not actually, a Pochampalli. It's a Kanchipuram. It's Ayaram Butti sari, what they say, 1,000 rupees.
And then Kalakshetra is another school of such weaves.
I know. I've worked there. So
this one particularly looked like Kalakshetra sari to me.
Yeah, okay. No, it isn't a Kalakshetra sari, but
Kanchipuram Ayaram Butti. I have one like that. No.
Okay. I've made a note of that. Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to ask Deepthi something?
I can see that Kalpakam Yechuri is unmuted and Padma Venkatraman is also unmuted.
Yeah.
Enjoyed.
Thank you.
It's an excellent presentation and with superb explanations.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was a little late. That's all.
That's okay. I don't think you missed anything. We had internet issues. You think you must have joined.
I hope. Thank you.
Thank you for joining, Amma.
Thank you very much, Usha. This is Padma here. The excellent presentation, and it was very interesting when the speaker said the female faces are all the same. Probably they were not allowed to see their faces, and the male faces were different, probably because they were real. That was an interesting, I didn't know about it.
Yeah, that was only true only for that period, and it was primarily either as a kind of a acknowledgement to the fact that their anonymity should be preserved, or genuinely the artist did not have access to the women's faces, but was clearly given the mandate that he must depict them. So it could be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. In fact, that painting showing that group of women, what is that painting?
From the Padshanama.
Yeah, from the Padshanama. If you see Dara Shiko's wedding painting.
Absolutely.
In the museum,
yeah,
the group of women, the receiving the Baratis, that group of women, I've always wondered about them because they're not in any burqas, or they're not, they're all showing their faces.
Yeah,
and now I realize it's just a group of women. I mean, just to show.
No, I must reiterate here that the burqa is not shown in any of the Mughal period paintings. The royal women, and there were several hundred wives and children and so on in the Zanana, chose to stay in seclusion, but they were by no means, in any way curtailed, because they were taking court decisions. Many newer scholarship shows that they were actually running the empire in
like Noor Jahan. Like Noor Jahan herself.
Noor Jahan, Jahanara, all of them. There's some fabulous books out there. Dara Shiko's painting, yes, it's at the National Museum, same period. One of the masterpieces, again, well known. Yes, you're absolutely right. But those women existed because all the musicians, the singers, the dancers, the courtesans were all women. And they were more emancipated, really, in terms of their freedom.
Yes. Yeah, and that the fact that the Mughal rulers allowed themselves to be painted and didn't want it to be depicted in painting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We do have standalone portraits of Noor Jahan and other royal women, but those are standalone portraits. They're not shown in mass gatherings.
Yeah.
If we have no more questions, shall we close this discussion? And thank you, Deepthi, for that very excellent talk. And thank you for the participation from all the members who joined us on this platform. Thank you so much. Usha?
Yeah, thank you, Deepthi, for that presentation and for sparing so much time for us and in spending so much time preparing the presentation. It would have been really heartbreaking if you couldn't show it today.
Yeah, I apologize, but
No need to apologize. We all know that these technical problems crop up sometimes. But then usually, we take the precaution of keeping a copy of the presentation, which I didn't do in this case. But anyway, it went off very well, and I am happy that most of the audience stayed with us.
Yeah, thank you all.
At the end of your presentation, which shows, how they all liked your presentation. Thank you so much. And it is really nice to see such a young person coming up and being one of the leaders in their chosen field. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, quite fantastic.
I thank all the members of AIWC, and there are several non-members who have joined. I thank all of you for joining this very nice presentation. We'll continue to have, as Jamila has already explained, we'll continue to have such webinars in future also, first Thursday of every month. And Jamila has been choosing really very good topics and good resource persons. So you can look forward to that. And once again, I thank all of you. Thank you for joining, and thank you. Special thanks to Deepthi.
Thank you all.
Watching, and I think her parents are watching, both of them. So I thank them also for being part of this. Thank you. And thank you, Jamila, for managing the crisis so beautifully at the
Yeah, thank you.
Without you, we would have been in real trouble.
Yeah, you held on to the audience, so thank you.
Yeah, congratulations to the Trivandrum. Congratulations to the Trivandrum branch of AIWC. This was really quite erudite and really, really nice. I'm not a member, but I'm from Delhi. I was invited by a member.
Thank you.
But I hope you will continue your association with them. Please rejoin if you have not done so already.
Usha, can I say something about Geeta?
Yeah.
For many of you who don't know, Geeta is one of the guides in the National Museum. So that's why she has got so much of knowledge about art, and she was mentioning that Dara Shikoh painting and all. So I'm so happy Geeta could be here. And participation of such people really enhances our knowledge also. So I'm so happy Geeta could join. Yeah.
Invited by Chitra, my dear friend.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Good. Glad that you could be here, Geeta. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta, for those inputs.
Thank you, Jamila ji. You are wonderful.
Thank you, all of you. Let us end the meeting here. Though, we don't feel like leaving after such a interesting discussion. I hope to meet you again at our next webinar. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jamila, and thank you to all of you.